All right. Can everyone see my screen?
Yep.
Okay, awesome. All right, so today we're going to be discussing leadership in engineering. Everything from this presentation comes from the Project Management Institute. For those of you not familiar with that, it's a great resource. You can get a certification in project management. If you would like to know more about that, feel free to reach out to me, but it's a great resource. All righty. So starting off, I'd just like to discuss the dynamic equilibrium in project management, specifically engineering. So obviously we know that engineering is really just projects from big to small. Leadership, management, and project flow are part of this process. And it's good to distinguish the differences between leadership and management because they are different, but they are needed to work together. So defining management. So that works by the first step is being planning and budgeting. So in project management, really the detailed steps in resources, defining timetables. It's a very rigid process. It's pretty well thought out. Your staffing and organizing, there's a strong emphasis on matching individuals who have had prior experience or are specialized in that area to do those kind of tasks on a job. And problem solving. So the managers will go ahead and check in on this project, see how it's going, any derivations or taking correct actions, making sure all is going well in the project. Oops. There we go. So we're going to see some differences between management and leadership. So here's the first difference. So when we're talking about management, defining the direction and getting started on a project, leadership more so acts on the vision of those who are incorporated on this project. So just being able to involve personal dreams and aspirations of the people is different than management when you're looking to accomplish a certain task. Also, aligning the people looks different. So where we previously just talked about setting specific guidelines to someone who, for instance, is specialized in that area and giving tasks to experts in that area, it's different. In leadership, there needs to be a buy-in or internal commitment from the team members. With inspiring and motivating the members on your team, it looks a little bit different as well. It's based on being able to tap into the values and emotions of the people rather than, just accomplishing a task or just getting work done. So with that said, there are problems in both if you're too far on one side of the spectrum with leadership. So for instance, having too strong of a leadership can be disruptive to orderly planning. In leadership, when you're trying to make multiple compromises to reach a common goal, there can be changes made for just the sake of making changes and not really accomplishing anything. Also in leadership, we find that hierarchy is not as important as in management, and this tends to break down the communication channels and for the roles and responsibilities, and allows people to make important decisions who might not be authorized to do so. And then also with that, if the leadership is also very strong, it gives the ability for selfish individuals to hijack the common good for their own. Management also has some issues with it. So in management, you're looking to produce consistent results. This kind of deteriorates from the need to go out and try new things, have new innovative methods. So I guess the realm for being able to take a new step or try something different is minimized. The success is measured in the ability to get the task done, and it has repetition. This following makes it hard for any problems that you may encounter when you're used to doing the same steps over and over again. Here are some just different descriptions of how they differ. So for defining the project goals and, sorry about that. For defining the different project goals and timelines, in management, you typically see short timeframes, strict framework of details, I guess the importance of eliminating risk, and with leadership, more so see long time frames, more of a bigger picture approach, calculated risk, and people's values. As we move on, so like we said, there's a specialization. People who are good at a certain task will be assigned to that. In leadership, it's more integration, more collaborative. Not to say there's not collaborative efforts in management, but there's more of a strong emphasis on that. And then here, when we're doing the actual problem solving, we like predictability and control in management, whereas in leadership, there's expansion, surprising, and energizing. You don't want to be too predictable to not go ahead and try new things, but also a level of predictability in a project is important, as you don't want it to fail. All right, and then here are just some typical aspects of engineering project management. So a strong emphasis on short timeframes, elimination of risk, all of these things we've already discussed previously. Sorry, this keeps jumping around. And performance deterioration. Obviously, we don't really want that to happen, but it has a trend, and that's why it's on here. Alrighty. Okay. And then this last page is interesting. It go ahead and shows you the different types of leadership. So there's forceful leadership, enabling leadership, strategic leadership, and operational leadership. This chart goes ahead and tells you the pros and cons to each. There's no correct type of leadership. It's all in what is best for that situation, the people you're working with, and it's up to you to decide what kind of leadership position you want to take. So I guess I would encourage all of you to think to yourself, if you find yourself when you're doing a group project that you take on the leadership roles, to see and look at a chart like this and say, am I more forceful in this category or enabling? It's just interesting, so you can kind of reflect on your habits and patterns of how you like to lead and maybe make changes based on that. And then lastly, if you're new or you haven't been at the previous meetings, we have the QR codes for our GroupMe, our mailing list survey, and our engagement survey. So if you need those, you can go ahead and take a quick scan. And then I'd like to pass it over to Keith from Trane Technologies. He's got some awesome experience in the field, and I'm sure he has some leadership experience or stories that he'd like to share with us. And we'll leave some time for questions.
Great, thank you, Sid, appreciate it.
We got you.
Good, okay. And I'm gonna leave it this way because I always like to look ahead in presentations. So if I was you guys, I always try to get like 2 slides ahead of whoever's presenting so I can think about questions I want to ask them. So I'll leave it up there. You guys have good eyes, so you should be able to see it. So I'm Keith Sultana. I am a Senior Vice President at Trane Technologies. I'm responsible for supply chain and operational services. And I'll explain a little bit of what that is because it's kind of a compilation of a lot of different things. So first thing is I'm responsible for procurement for the company. Second, I have environmental health and safety for the company and a big part of the sustainability piece. I have trade compliance, I have logistics, I have real estate. I'm responsible for about 700 facilities around the world. And I'm also, I've been in manufacturing for a very long time, about 30 years actually. So I've run plants, I've run many plants, I've run global plants, I've built plants, I've closed plants. So project management is in my blood because I've been doing it since literally, my first co-op assignment. Just 2 seconds about me. How did I get here? So I was at Michigan State. I was a mechanical engineering student. I graduated in 1992, which is probably before most of you were around. So maybe your parents went to Michigan State when I did. But anyways, the the time when we were looking for jobs, it was actually a pretty bad recession, and it was really hard to find job. Not unlike today, actually. It's pretty weird today, very different. So I was literally walking around in the engineering building, and I saw a flyer up on the wall that said GE was taking interviews. So I said, what the heck, I'll go interview, and I did, and I didn't hear from them, and I went home over the summer, and I finally heard from GE. In fact, I got like a FedEx letter because there's no email or any of that stuff at that time, right? So, and they said, come to Cincinnati and interview. So I went to Cincinnati. That's where the aircraft engines division is headquartered. And I worked, and I got an offer actually, and it was my 21st birthday. So I'll never forget getting my first, what I'll call real job, because I had worked at Little Caesars and a hobby shop, and I've done all kinds of, pick crops, cut grass, done all that kind of stuff before. So my first real job was at GE. So I get to GE, and I'm in what's called logistics support. And my job was to write manuals for people to take apart military engines and put together military engines. And this was during the first Gulf War. So we were very busy. I didn't like it very much, to be honest. In fact, I thought I chose completely the wrong field. If this is what engineers do, I need to not be an engineer. But I did a good job, I guess, because they gave me another shot. But they said, hey, why don't you go try? You could stay here, and we'd like you to, but you could go look at the manufacturing. So I went and I interviewed for a job on the manufacturing floor in one of the plants, and I loved it. I love the pace. I love the people. I love the smells of the plant. I mean, just everything about manufacturing fit my personality, which was very, very fast paced, like to be working on stuff and feel like you're in the middle of the action, not sitting in a cubicle, kind of moving paper from X to Y. So I went into manufacturing, and I think I found my calling. I was a quality engineer at the time, and I was doing, again, military products. So we were all about making sure that all the processes and procedures were followed. We did obviously a lot of government work. And then I got a chance to go on the rotational program. So I went to a rotational program at GE. My first job was a project job, mechanical engineer, or like an ME on the floor. I was putting in new equipment and rearranging production spaces, and then, which was fun. But then I got my first supervisory job, and then I knew, oh man, I really, really like this. So I was leading a team of about 60 in a punch press department in one of the factories. And I had moved from aircraft engines to locomotives. So I got to build jet engines and locomotives. Those were my first two experiences out of school or while I was in school. And it was great. I just knew that I really connected with people. I probably should like own a Waffle House and be a Walmart greeter. That's going to be my, after careers. I'll probably do those two things. So from there, I actually got a chance to switch businesses, and I went to lighting, GE Lighting, where we made lots and lots of light bulbs. And again, I was working in a plant. I was in Lexington, Kentucky, and I was doing environmental health and safety and materials was one assignment. And then my next assignment was quality. I was a quality engineer again. I rotated off program into a quality manager job. We were a tier 1 automotive supplier. So if anybody has internship for a supplier for one of the automotive plants, you know what that's like. Lots of just in time, lots of high quality expectations. And then I ran half the plant. I then left and I did like a process improvement job. They were called master black belts at the time. I did that at another place at GE, and then I got a chance to run my own factory. So I moved to Mattoon, Illinois, which is south of Champaign, and I ran a 450 person non-union plant making halogen and other what I'll call specialty lighting. Man, what a great experience. And then from there, I ran distribution. I ran all logistics and distribution. I ran the materials planning for lighting. And then I went to GE Security, and then I ran all the manufacturing and procurement for GE Security. And then I left GE, and I actually came to Ingersoll Rand. So Ingersoll Rand split about 6 months ago into two companies, Trane Technologies, which I'll tell you a little bit about, and Ingersoll ran 2 publicly traded companies. So went through that process, which is crazy. But when I came to Ingersoll Rand, I ran all the manufacturing procurement for one of the the industrial businesses. So like compressors, tools, pumps, club car, golf cars, of all things. And then I got a chance to go to the climate side. So I ran all the manufacturing globally for the climate business. And this is like commercial Trane. So a lot of like big chiller systems that might be in actually at the university, hotels, hospitals, things like that, power plants. And then Thermo King, which moves around everything refrigerated. Thermo King moves. So I ran the ops for that. I ran procurement for a while. Then I ran all of it. So I became an officer of the company at that point and ran all of manufacturing and procurement. And when we split the company, we sort of changed the structure of the company at the same time, restructured everything just for fun. And then COVID hit basically, I don't know, we started watching in January, and about the time that you guys came for spring break, which was like our first day one celebration of Trane Technologies, pretty much all heck broke loose around the world. So we started in China. We're managing COVID from China to Europe to the US and everywhere in between for our 40,000 associates, 32 plants, 20 something distribution centers, and 700 locations. So it's been project management on steroids all year long. And it's been really exciting. And honestly, all that stuff that I told you led up to my, having the skills to kind of manage a pandemic across the global business at a fairly large scale. We're about $15 billion or so in revenue. And splitting a company that literally spent 10 years putting itself together was pretty hard too, because you had to create 2 standalone companies that could work at the same time. And going through all of that, and you're with all your colleagues that you've been with, and everybody's like, well, what team are you on? And no, I want to be on that team. So anyways, I even wore the shirt. It says Trane Technologies. So I've got the brand, and I want to tell you a little bit about Trane Technologies now that I've told you a little bit about myself. Along my travels, I got married in Kentucky. I married a girl from Eastern Kentucky. We met in Lexington, watching basketball. Actually, she's a UK fan. I'm obviously a Michigan State fan. And along the way, now we've been married 23 years. We have 3 sons. One's a sophomore in college. We have a senior in high school and a junior in high school. And then I already told you about the whole pet situation at our house. So when we're not rescuing animals and chasing the boys, I do like to work on old cars and vintage race cars and stuff like that. So I'm very much into anything with 4 wheels. So, but Trane Technologies, brand new company, and I really want to just kind of explain a little bit about what this is, because it sounds like corporate-y speak, and I'm sure you guys hear enough of that from companies coming to talk to you. But this whole idea, and I got to be part of this, which you would think the kind of knuckle dragon ops guy getting a chance to create what would the vision be for the company, was all about figuring out how do we create a sustainable world. If you think about where most of the greenhouse gases are produced in the world, they come from us. So like a quarter of it from just keeping things cold, and the energy that's used not only to run the air conditioning in a building, but let's say lighting, and then the refrigerants that are in our products, they account for like 40+% of all the emissions in the world, plus the electricity usage. So we have been thinking about how the heck do we fix that? Like, we want to fix our company, which then fix an industry, which then fixes the world. We figured if we could do it and the industry did it, we would change the global greenhouse gas footprint by 2%, just one industry. So we said, well, what the heck? We want the whole company, like Trane Technology exists to do this. And I've gotten a chance to do some pretty fun parts of it, and I'll explain about that in a minute. Our thing is all about innovation. And I think that that the more that companies innovate on their products and the more that they kind of meet where, what customers value, the better. Our customers are asking us more and more, save us energy and make it environmentally sustainable. So we have to do both of those things. And for us, it's kind of a life cycle management process that we use. We actually have very specific, and some of the management stuff you were talking about before is our process around how we would bring a new product to market, or how do you develop a new technology ahead of a new product so they can consume it. Or in my world, when do I show up and try to figure out, well, who are we going to get the parts from, or how are we going to manufacture it? We use processes to kind of manage those projects that can span, a couple of years or maybe even 3 years, depending upon the kind of product, all focusing on, greenhouse gas, energy reduction, life cycle cost for our customers. Okay. The other thing that we talk a lot about is this idea of sustainability isn't just environmental. The sustainability we talk about is around business, about environmental and social sustainability. So the business sustainability is, if we have a strong company, then we're going to have the money to like stay in business and we won't close, which means we can hire the best people, innovate in a very strong way compared to our competitors. So that's what it means about business sustainability. The whole people sustainability and social sustainability is all of the things that we need to do to build this diverse, inclusive workplace. It's signing up for the Paradigm for Parity by 2030, which is we'll have women and men being at parity by 2030 in our company at leadership levels. It's like trying to figure out, in my world, how do I double the diverse supplier spend? And how do I attract and retain more diverse candidates, ethnically diverse candidates, above and beyond what normally comes into our industry and into manufacturing. And it's a very exciting part to be part of a company that kind of lives their values versus it just shows up on a piece of paper. As an example, when I first started working on Paradigm for Parity a few years ago, we had about 23 or 24% women versus men. So just call it 75-25. Now it's 40% women and 60% men. And how did that happen? It was a big project that we managed very specifically. It started with our early talent. It's recruiting women into the company. It's promoting women. It's making holes for women to get promoted. It's trying to ensure that we can be more flexible in the way that we think about work when people want to start families and things like that. So that didn't happen by accident. We used kind of project management thinking around what goal do we want to solve? How are we at right now? What are the reasons why we're there now? And then what are we going to do about it to make it better? So we use this idea of project management in almost every problem that we try to get at. So some of the things that we do is we make some of the things that are on this page. So a lot of you guys are working from home. So all that stuff in there to keep your house warm or cold, we do. All that stuff that we do to keep your food coming and your vaccines coming and all of that stuff, that's stuff on the bottom. And then all of the things that if you could actually go somewhere, you might actually experience the environment being cooled or heated by some of the things on the top. And we have a lot of brands that you might recognize or you might have heard of, or maybe you haven't heard of any of them, but Thermo King and Trane are both market leaders in what we do. So if you were to look outside behind buildings or on the roofs or on in the front of a tractor trailer going down the road, you're going to see a lot of these products as you're doing other work. Our companies have been around a really long time, like 125 years for Trane and like 80 years for Thermo King. So a really long time. So a little bit about the company. We're actually doing pretty well. We're really kind of positioned, I think, to kind of get at these megatrends around sustainability. We're all about energy efficiency, and we're really thinking about how do we not only create products, but the services to keep that equipment working at the way that we wanted it to. You can see our revenue. We're actually about 15 billion, but this is sort of how it splits up between commercial HVAC around the world, transport refrigeration around the world, and residential, which is mostly a North America product line. Okay. So with that, that's a little bit about Trane Technologies. So we're only 6 months old. So we're like a 100+ year old startup. It's kind of fun because we're really thinking through what are the things that we want to change, what are the things that we want to keep the same. People are helping us co-create the culture we want to build. So we're going through this whole process of listening to people around the company, like, what do you like about the company? What do you want to change? And then literally we're meeting every couple of weeks as a executive leadership team on how do we want to change it. So we're changing our leadership principles. We're changing how people are compensated. We're changing the performance management processes, all to align around the stuff that I just talked to you about. So we're kind of trying to make this company real, and it's kind of fun actually getting a chance to kind of remake something that's been around and you got all this history to build off of. So does that make sense? Okay. So I'm going to show you guys something, and I'm hoping I'm still going to share. So hang with me for 1 minute. Yep.
Pretty awesome. Get some insight. I'll lead with the first question, and then I'm sure a lot of people will follow. What advice do you have to new graduates who are fresh out into the work industry, who end up in a manufacturing engineering role, or maybe a frontline supervisor, or that specific role?
Yeah. So remember, the people who have been there usually have been there for a while, and they can be your best help or maybe worst help, depending upon how you interact with them. So I would just recommend that whatever problem they have, solve it, and spend time working on learning people's names, spend time on understanding a little bit about who they are as a person, and then introduce some change gently. And then once you've sort of built up some credibility, introduce some change that's more transformational. So when you're in these roles, particularly when you're in rotational assignments, you don't have a lot of time. Like, these roles are like 6 months at a time typically, or an internship, right? You only have a summer. So it's literally like, what am I supposed to do? How do I ramp up so I can actually do something? And by the time you're doing something, you're like leaving to go to the next thing. So just be sensitive to the people that are around you, that they're probably going to be there and you're not. So how do you help them as best that you can, and in a very genuine way? Like, it literally could be as simple as, you know what, I can't ever seem to get pens or pencils. Could you please like go get me a pen or pencil? Right on, I'm going to get you a pen or pencil. It's about being that servant leader. And then the more that you do that, the more that you'll sort of earn the right to get out there and get things done the way that you want to change it. And ask for their help. You know, they'll do it. They've wanted to change things, but nobody will let them. So you got to figure out how to empower them so they'll help you change quicker.
Awesome. That's super helpful. Thank you.
Yep. I don't ask for permission very much anymore. Like, you know, I was in a plant and sometimes I actually do, like, I'll go work as a supervisor again for like on some of the big projects just because I miss it. And I was working in an area where they were doing a lot of welding, and it was clear the flow of the layout was really bad. Like, this was a new plant and the engineers didn't do a good job laying it out. And the people were like walking all over the place and they were kind of upset. And I said, well, what do you want to do? And they're like, well, what do you mean? I'm like, well, let's change it. And they're like, well, what do you mean? I'm like, we're going to change it. And they're like, what do you mean? I'm like, hey, you know, Joe, who's driving a fork truck, I want you to move this over here right now. And I start dragging equipment around the plant, and literally in 40 minutes, we change their area the way that they want it. And they're just like, oh my God, you know? So people get nervous, like they're not allowed to do certain things, but really these factories are there to make them more successful and serve the customer. So the more that you can do that and kind of like enable people to think they can go do stuff, you would be amazed at the change that they'll drive. What else? Does not have to be about work stuff. I'm waiting for somebody to ask me like, who am I going to vote for?
I'm wondering, could you talk a little bit about like transitioning to a different role within the same company and how you um constructively like worked with your managers to find a place where you felt it was more appropriate?
Yeah, it's a really good question. Like, people sometimes don't know if it's okay, if they should move on to their next job, right? Like, they're nervous, they're going to get, their manager's going to be mad because you want to go do something different, or you're going to hurt somebody's feelings. I would tell you, like, early in your career, people expect you to move around more. And I think that the key is finding a manager that actually spends time developing you and understanding like what you want to do. And I don't mean like once a year at a performance review, but like if you have like regular one-on-ones, how's it going? Are you, what's going good? What's not going good? What do you want to be 3 jobs from now? And then how do you think this job fits into it? And then let's think about when is an appropriate time. Most companies, at least I've worked for 2 very big industrial companies, early in your career, it's like 18 to 24 months you should move. Okay. So if you're in your first job out of school and it starts to get to be like 2-ish years, you really should be like thinking like, it's time for me to go try something different at this point, unless this is literally the thing you want to work at for the next 40 years, which I would recommend that you don't do that right away. Like, you go figure out what you like and you don't like, and then figure out where you want to spend the 40 years. So, but I would just tell you, like, I'll give you some do's and don'ts. So don't bid for a job without telling your manager. Okay, don't do that. Like, people sometimes think, well, I've been here 2 years, I've got time on job, it's no problem. It's just disrespectful. So always talk to your manager and say, hey, I'm thinking about this. Here's why. What do you think? I'd like to bid for the job. Do you have any problems with that? Or, and if they go, yeah, you can't leave, then you kind of say, well, look, I really want to, it's time for me to do something different. And, I want to kind of stay on a path to whatever my career goal is. And you just got to be a little bit of take control of your own situation at that point, because you've at least given them the benefit of the doubt and let them know that you're thinking about it. Okay. Inside the company, if you're leaving the company, that's different. So there's 2 rules of thumb on that. Some managers get really mad about it and they're like, well, just go and you're fired and blah, blah, blah. I'm not that manager. I try to tell people, like, it is absolutely natural for people to 2 weeks from now. I think people are, people can handle that, but I think you have to build rapport with your manager to feel comfortable doing that yourself. Now, if it's a bad situation, don't tell them, just be courteous, give them, a few weeks notice and transition the work and move on. If you're going to leave the company, but always try not to burn a bridge, because I would just tell you, like, I've only interviewed, I think literally 3 jobs, and all the ones that I've ever had, every other job was somebody calling me and said, I'd like you to come work here, or I really want you to go do that job, or, I got this job for you, would you take it, kind of thing. So those people who leave badly, it comes back to haunt you, just because the longer you stay in an industry or doing a type of role, the circle of people gets smaller, particularly as you get higher up. So I would just be very cognizant of the fact that be very respectful to people. They gave you your shot. They let you go and do things that maybe you didn't get a chance to do. So I just think, like, think about that, okay? But be comfortable with talking to people about those things. It's very natural.
Keith, how do you recommend going about finding a good mentor that maybe isn't necessarily on your team or maybe not even associated with your team?
Yeah. A lot of times, literally just ask them. Like, if you're in a place where, you see somebody and you're admiring them, and it's like, wow, that person has a great leadership style, or look at how they motivate their teams. You could ask them and just say, can I spend a little bit of time on you? I want to kind of pick your brain on X, Y, Z. And 9 times out of 10, that person would spend the time to do that. The 1 time out of 10 that they're like, no, I don't want to talk to you. Well, you pretty much learn that they're probably not a good mentor. So most people will go, I'd be happy to, I'd be happy to. So I would just say, if you don't mind, when it's convenient, I'll come in whenever you want me to talk anytime. But I think if you just ask them and tell them why you think that they would be a good person to talk to, that would be, I think most people will help you out. At least most people that I've ever done that with have been very courteous about it. I've only had 1 time that person was not, and I told you that's the 1 out of 10. So.
Well, I have a question more general to like the company of Trane. So you kind of explained how it was like 100 years in making. It's kind of like a startup, because I think it was part of Ingersoll Rand. Can you explain the dynamic more and like how like it was part of a big thing and now it's like kind of a startup in a way?
Yeah. So imagine Ingersoll Rand was all of those things together that I talked about: compressors, tools, club car, Trane, residential Trane, Thermo King globally. And then investors and the board kind of say, you know what, it's too complicated. Like, it'd be better if you guys were more focused on certain things. And the IR side is pretty good at these industrial things, and the climate side is really good at these refrigeration, transportation things, both stationary and so it really kind of got born out of sort of an investor view of the company. Should we be together? Should we split apart? So once the board decided that that was going to happen, it took about a year, actually, and literally every process that you can imagine had to be separated. So in my world, every purchase order, every contract, every lease, every person, everything had to get put into 2 standalone companies that are listed on the New York Stock Exchange. So we're TT, and then the other one is IR. And what was interesting about that is the reason why investors wanted to do this is they thought that the stocks would be worth more basically apart than together. And if you look at what's happened to our stock since the split, which was right at the time of COVID, our stock has done quite well. In fact, the Ingersoll Rand stock had done quite well the whole time that I've been here, since like 2008. So it was really kind of investor related. But once you get past that sort of, okay, you're going to split and do that piece, then it's all like, well, what do you want to be when you grow up? And that was a very deliberate process. Like, from, what's the brand, to what are you going to call yourself, to taglines, to all these different things around what is this company going to look like, the logos, the that stuff. And I just think that, I know it seems kind of weird, but that's the startup part, because we had all those things. We had values, we had leadership principles, we had all these years of doing similar things, but we actually took the time to decide, do we still want to do that, or do you want to do something different? And that's where sort of this, challenge possible came from, and thinking about, a gigaton of carbon out of the environment and all that sort of stuff, where you just kind of go, wow, that's pretty aspirational stuff. That feels more startup versus, 125 and 80-year-old kind of companies that maybe incrementally want to improve. So I think that's probably the difference. And then, who do we want in the company? Like, how do you want to recruit people? How do you want to develop people? What kind of people do you want to like bring to the company, and how to drive this diversity and inclusion piece that I was talking about? Again, that was a very deliberate choice. That didn't happen by chance. And we were doing those things in Ingersoll Rand, but this kind of gave us a chance to just, are we going fast enough, and challenge some of those things? So now, it would be crazy without COVID, but throw COVID on all of that and trying to keep the plants running and people safe, and it's been pretty a pretty exciting, let's say 7 or 8 months. because our COVID stuff started a little before people started really taking it serious, because we have several plants in China and in Asia, and we were kind of dealing with it. Really, quite honestly, my first crisis management call about COVID was January 5th. So thank you. Really good question.
Now, did you think in January we would be where we are right now because of COVID when you're getting those first initial calls?
I knew I had I guess a bad feeling that this was going to be all over the place. Where we are right now, no, I don't think anybody could have predicted that. I knew that it wasn't going to stay in China. I knew that it was going to become global, and I was watching the reaction of people in China and the reaction of our teammates in China, and how seriously they took it. I mean, like they basically quarantine everybody in their apartments. You literally were not allowed to go out. You were brought food, you were brought water. They built 2 hospitals in literally like 12 days, like 2 1,500 bed hospitals. If apartment blocks got quarantined, they were blockaded off. The small cities and things, the small towns and the rural areas were kind of like blockading themselves off. So they wouldn't let people from let's say the smaller towns into their town. That's pretty intense. And it happened with like super fast speed. I mean, they went from sort of 0 to 100 in like 2 weeks time, 3 weeks time maximum. So when the government reacts that strongly, it's not well, we're only doing this because we're, an communist country or whatever. That's not it. These folks were trying to stop a major pandemic from getting across the entire country, and they were very successful with it comparatively. Do I believe the numbers? No, but I do believe that with everything that I do know, which is actually, a little bit with everything that we have going on there and just people I've worked with for the last 20 years there, it was a lot more controlled, right? Very different philosophy towards this, very different atmosphere, And then we dealt with it in Europe. Okay, so we have facilities in Italy, we have facilities in France and Germany. So we were in about Europe, and the US kind of started at the same time, and then it was Brazil and now India. So we watched this move across the globe. Mexico shutting down their entire manufacturing sector, basically overnight. Trying to get plants started back up down there, working with the governments. I mean, like literally pretty big deal. Kind of nuts, to be honest.
Do you have any other questions before we go ahead and end our meeting? Going once, going twice. All right, very good. Keith, thank you so much for stopping by and spending an hour of your evening to chat with us about program management in Trane.
Yep, sure. Thank you.